So I'm Jeri Robinson Lawrence, and my farm is called Flying Fibers, and we live in York, Pennsylvania. I'm originally a city kid from Buffalo, New York, and always was the kid bringing home kittens, and knew there was something in there. And I met my husband, who is English. First time I visited England, I saw these things from the airplane everywhere, and that was it. His parents took me to a South of England show. That's their agricultural fair, and I was hooked. That was it. That was the start.
So then you decided to say, I don't want a cat, I don't want a dog, I want a sheep that I'm going to bring home?
I always loved wool, and growing up in Buffalo, New York, you need it because the snowfall is tremendous, and I'm of Irish descent and English, I've just learned, Yorkshire, which is where they're from. And it was the warmest material there was. So we wore it all the time. It was completely natural. And I've always worked with my hands. I'm an artist by training. And the feel of the wool, it just worked. It was like magic for me.
So you and I have been joking about that, walking around like I wanting to touch everybody's sweater.
Yes, that's what we
all.
all do. And the other thing we do is go,
it smells so good.
Yes,
now,
especially right off the sheep.
It does. Now, is that something that kind of sticks with it? Because I'm trying to figure out if some of the old sweaters that I have, if that's just my mind doing that.
I don't think it's your mind. When it's fresh, though, you can really smell them. Sometimes when it gets wet, you can still smell it. But when we get a fresh fleece, we're just like, it's just heaven to us. It's a perfect scent.
It feels, I have to just ask because I think you'll be fine with it.
I don't use any hand cream.
Okay, so the lanolin, I'm assuming, just really comes into your hands and makes them soft as anything if you knit constantly, right?
Yes, if you knit with it. Some people strip the lanolin by overwashing it. Some people actually add lanolin back in. You can buy lanolin and use it on your wool. People will also soak their sweaters in lanolin if they work outside, because the lanolin is what will repel the water even more so. So stripping all the oils out of it is not a good thing. You want to keep them in there.
So I think that's great. Now tell me about that and why that unique characteristic of
the lanolin. Oil and water don't mix.
Yes.
So it's like an oil. So the water just rolls right off it.
But it also seems to somehow be a moisturizer in a way, or is that just the fact that it retains water?
Well, our skin receives the oils, but the sweater itself, if it's raining, will repel it. So yeah, it's kind of the magic product, isn't it?
It is.
Sheep are amazing.
It is the magic. You might have some big hefty sheep shearing and he's got soft hands.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about some of the other characteristics of wool.
So it's a fire retardant. It's biodegradable. They're a sustainable component of our ecosystem. So if you have sheep, you have fertilizer, and you have meat. I raise mine for wool primarily. I have to say I haven't eaten mine. People do, and it's perfectly fine. So they're the entire system. They're the cycle of life. They give us, and if we give them love, it's just perfect harmony.
Now, in many ways, these are used as pasture restoration animals, correct? So they do quite a bit to distribute. Obviously, they're going to eat. They're browsers, correct?
Yes.
Are they great? No, they're grazers.
Well, but some of mine will browse.
Interesting.
It depends on how tasty it is, and if it's like berry bushes and some berry leaves. And you do have to be careful because some things are toxic, but they love willow. Willow is a great, if coppiced, willow will keep growing and provide fodder. That's one of the things they love most. And I hadn't told you this, but I'm actually on the board for the Horn Farm Center in York, Pennsylvania. In Hellam, actually, and it is a center for regenerative farming practices, and primarily the goal is to educate the public. So one of the things they're very interested in with this entire cycle is that you can use a silvopasture method where you have trees that can provide nuts for you, that can provide your posts for your fencing if you have locust. The sheep fertilize the trees, so it's just this perfect harmony. And you would rotationally graze, so you could bring cows through first, then sheep, then chickens, ducks are a little lighter. They don't scratch the earth up as much. And so you rotate, and then the ground, the soil composition, everything just works in harmony. So that's really exciting too.
So now this can be a regional thing, correct? Because there's a lot that we talk about with carbon sequestration and the ability of the ground to regenerate. But somebody in Nevada is not necessarily going to have the same kind of regeneration characteristics as somebody in Connecticut.
Right. So and in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So we have a lot of rock in Pennsylvania, so they actually help get our seed into the ground and get everything in with their little delicate feet. Even though they're massive, they work nicely for that. And I don't know what someone in Nevada would do.
They have Navajo churros, and they live in 120-degree weather, and they are fairly drought tolerant animals, very low, at least that's my understanding anyway, very low resource dependent, and they give wool, but it's a different kind of wool than the sheep. So sheep have been regionally adapted to accomplish different purposes, correct?
Yes,
and that's one
correct.
of the nice things about them is it's a smaller animal that you can kind of take here and there, and they've been a part of our history, have they not?
Part of history for us. Well, they're in the Bible if you think of the Jacob's sheep.
Yes.
Yeah,
the spotted sheep of Jacob, and
And the sheep I raise are primarily English breeds because of my lineage and my husband's lineage coming from Yorkshire. So these are, the Wensleydale is one of the largest breeds in England, and so it's been used, it's dual purpose, so it can be used for meat or wool. And it has been used to improve the carcass size of the hill breeds in England. They're meat breeds.
Like what would be a hill breed?
Swaledale would be one of the most popular, and but they've used it on a lot of different breeds. But the Swaledale is the one that's used on most frequently, and so they improve the carcass size. You get more meat. They're hardier. They can grow 12 to 14 inches in a year.
Wow.
So not only can they improve the carcass size and bulk up other sheep, but they have magnificent wool properties. So.
Okay, so now this is one of the components that we think is really interesting, is the ability to take the ingredients and mix them to make a different cake.
Right.
So if you do have one characteristics and you mix it into another sheep, the common question is, well, why don't you just keep that sheep and then you never need this one again?
So for me, it's the genetics are significant to our cultural history and also to learning. So these breeds, the heritage breeds, when the scrapie epidemic hit England and the British Isles in around 2000, wiped out flocks everywhere of the new sheep, the ones that we've modified and essentially created over time. The heritage breeds did not get scrapie. So they could be directly adjacent to a flock that had scrapie and had to be killed. They did not have it. So the heritage breeds have something in their genetic background that makes them resistant to these diseases that are wiping out other breeds today. So we have a lot that we can learn from them genetically, and maybe what we've made isn't so good after all. Why didn't they die?
And we don't always know what it is.
We don't know what it is yet.
That might be that one characteristic that go back. Yeah, we could talk to Temple Grandin, and she mentioned hawk disease in pigs and how they're 5 years into breeding for more production or a bigger weight. And 5 years in, they found out that this thing that they thought they were getting was causing another thing to trigger genetically, and then they have to go back and try and get it out.
Yes.
But how do you get it out? You
how do you get it out?
Something else back in.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm a firm believer in keeping them alive and around and unique. So no other animal is exactly like this. And if you eat different lambs, different sheep breeds, or mutton, they all taste different. So wider variety. It's not homogenized. And I also don't know details on this, but I know that our food has far less nutritional value now than it did in the 1950s.
And
what have we done?
What have we done? And some of the older breeds are not necessarily made to put on weight at a really fast rate, and so you want a sheep that's been around 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Uji raises black Welsh Mountain sheep, and she said to us that there's a difference in terms of the amount of minerals that a sheep will intake and implant into their body. When you think about it, maybe it might take 4, 5, 6 years to get that same number of minerals. So you need a sheep that has a little age on it. If you eat it at 1 or 2, it's not going to do that same process, and it will taste different.
And my husband, coming from England, he only ever ate mutton. He never ate lamb. So they must have been somewhere in history knew that they take that long to grow, and we've, as Americans, have supersized everything.
Well, but the Britons have done that too. They've kind of got, they have this book that Mary McConnell gave me. It's called Much Ado About Mutton. Have you read that one?
No, I'll have
great.
to.
Bob Kennard, I want to say.
Okay.
But he's talking about how this used to be the British staple of food.
This was
mutton, and now they've kind of gotten away from it because I don't want to eat mutton. It's an older animal, and there's that thing that occurs.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes it's just about cooking an animal differently that changes the taste.
Yes.
And so you might have
Not
something,
the same.
I might taste goat and I think, oh, goat is terrible, but I've since found out, no, you just cook it differently.
Right, the way it's made.
Yeah, and it might be a completely different thing, and it has some subtleties to the taste in ways that you wouldn't otherwise experience.
Right.
Because it's aged. It's stronger.
Stronger.
It's aged. Yes.
Yeah.
So going back to the breed concept and how that kind of resonates with you, with your heritage, is there something about this animal that you look at, that you think you'll look at, that your kids might look at, that your grandparents looked at in the same way that says that was home?
I know that both of my daughters, so my 23-year-old works side by side with me. She's my partner. We have a yarn store, a brick and mortar yarn store. Her goal in life is to do agri-tourism and preserve rare breed sheep. So it's definitely home for her, and wears wool. She's a wear wool, live wool, love wool gal. She wears wool year round, and it can get to 95-100 degrees in Lancaster. She's always got wool on. So she finds it to be the perfect heat body moderator. And my youngest, they've both grown up in 4-H, so they showed their sheep, they spin, they knit, they weave, they felt. My youngest sort of pushed us away at about 14. She was like, no, it's too dirty. But she has a natural connection to animals. Actually, both my girls are adopted. My oldest is from Russia. When she was 13, I learned that where she's from in Russia is actually the needle arts capital of Russia.
Wow.
So it's in her bones, because at 23, she is wiser than some 60-year-olds. In having taught her to knit at 6, spin at 9, and she runs our yarn shop and teaches all the classes. The youngest is from India. So she gravitated, when she would spin, to bright colors and silks. So it's like it's in their bones, it's in their culture. But she sort of rejected the 4-H. She picked up spinning at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. She won first place, and she hadn't spun in a year. So it's in there, it's in her bones. But she just got hired. She's going to dog grooming school. PetSmart is sending her because of her gift with animals.
Interesting.
So she laughs about it now. She's like, I guess 4-H was a good thing. Yeah. And she's happier than ever. So it's in
go
there.
Back to that part that you said, you talked about wool, wearing wool year round, and that was an interesting thing for me. I've got a wool sweater on.
Yeah.
It's not anything like what I'm seeing here, unfortunately.
No, but that's some of the things that she wears year round too, is the thinner.
The thinner. Wool is one of those amazing fibers when you start looking into it. It wicks moisture away from your skin.
Yes.
I mean, now we're all...
Lets you breathe.
Lets you breathe. So we have these, you go down to REI and you buy a Smart Wool.
Yes.
This very light undershirt, and it's $60, $70, $80 because people are starting to catch on the fact that this is sort of a miracle fiber.
Yes.
But it comes in many ways, it's like the sheep. It comes in all different shapes and sizes and does different things and different purposes and different weights, and it's kind of a great reflection of
spectacular.
The purpose, yeah.
I think when we look to our roots, they had something right that we weren't so knowledgeable about, that we threw the baby out with the bathwater, but now we're bringing it back. And
wonderful. Okay, so now you just have to You just have to tell us about what you're wearing here, if you would.
So
please.
right now, in addition to our own yarn, we manufacture a line so that we can get British long wools out to the public in greater quantity, because we're a small flock. We have 24 sheep. We have Wensleydales, Leicester long wools, and Shetlands. And so we import Wensleydale and Blueface Leicester from Britain, and we have it spun at our last large-scale spinning mill in Pennsylvania, and then I do all the dyeing. So we call it Yorkshire Medley because they're Yorkshire sheep, and we've blended them. And I'm wearing colors for a cloudy day, which is actually a California designer. She goes by Yellow Cosmo, and she does just these fabulous little things with color work. They're just always a little different. Like one of hers has a ginkgo leaf. And so this is the blend. And then this is British Wensleydale because yeah. And my daughter knit it for me.
Okay, so this seems softer than this.
Yes.
Is this a finer grain or different wool?
No, this is the blend. So Wensleydale is known as a harder wearing fiber. So I can wear my Wensleydale and do my farm chores, and it will hold up. It's an heirloom item. It's going to be alive long after I die. And the blue, so it's known for its durability, its strength, and its sheen. So that shine you're seeing on it is the wool. That's one of its special characteristics. There's no silk in it. People think it's blended with something, and if the light hits them right, you actually see the sheen on the sheep. And they can grow 12 to 14 inches in a year, so that's also part of the durability. It won't pill.
Length. Is that the right
staple
word?
length,
Okay.
yes. It won't pill, like shorter fibers will pill. So a shorter fiber is often softer, but you're going to get a lot of pilling with it.
So
we don't get
is just the
pilling those little balls. Yes, worms
ball.
like a little ball.
But that's the reason why it pills?
Yes,
I did not
the
know
length,
that.
it can crawl out. And yeah, with the Wensleydale, if it's, you know, that length, it's not going to crawl out so easily.
This is such a reflection of, you know, the different purpose. You have different sheep for a different thing, and if I want a little bit of a sturdier sweater that's soft, I'll mix a little of this.
Mix a little of this and a little of that.
Again, we're back to the cake.
Yes. So the Blueface Leicester, and I don't crossbreed the sheep. It's a crossbred wool. So I take some Blueface Leicester, some Wensleydale, so there's strands of both wools.
But that's fantastic, because you know what if you want a little bit of a different sweater, you just change the mix up a little bit.
Change
your
the
sheep's
mix.
still the same. So.
Yes.
Wow.
And this way I can still support the breeds without having 100 sheep or 500 sheep. And it allows me, I do all the dyeing myself. So
that's gorgeous blue.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
And the colors are all named after places in Yorkshire where my husband grew up. And so the Blueface Leicester gives it the softness and loft. So sort of bounces a little more. Wensleydale has a weight to it, so it drapes nicely. So if you want something that's going to drape or hang beautifully like a rayon does, Wensleydale wool will do that. So you don't have to use rayon to get drape.
Okay, so this is one of those things that I can see why the knitters get a little rabid, right? Because where do you stop? You know, you want to do this, and I could do that, and I can do that, and before you know it, you're down the rabbit hole. But it's not like you're down the rabbit hole with something that takes 5 minutes, right? I mean, how long did this sweater take you to make?
So I have a full-time day job and the farm and the shop. So I'm not a fast knitter. To me, it's a month of evenings doing it. And primarily I can knit more in the winter than I can in the summer. So, but it's going to last forever. So I don't have to knit another one.
But I mean, that impresses the heck out of me. If you can make that in a month in your evenings, that's.
You should see my daughter knit.
Well, I mean, I look around this place, and I am. My husband tells me I'm squirreling because look at that. Look at that. Yeah.
Shiny thing.
Patterns, colors, shapes, sizes.
Yes.
You know, it's not just this one thing. It's the edging around.
It's the edges. This is called feather and fan, that trim.
So they all have
certain
names
stitch.
to them, right?
Yes, stitches have names, and it's just how you put a variety of stitches together.
That's very interesting, because what that does is puts a little curl down here as well, right?
Yep.
So if I do this with a Wensleydale sheep, and I do that same stitch with a Cotswold or something.
What's a fuzzy one? So there are some fibers will do what we call lofting dramatically. They would fill in those holes. So there's certain wools you would never want to use for, do you see that lacy pattern in there?
Yes.
Certain wool would just fill in those holes and you'd never see them.
And you lose that pretty light.
You lose that.
Okay, well, but this thing where it curls, it kind of
It would still do that. It might be puffier. Yeah.
So you're gonna have that. So you can almost get a whole different
look completely
out of just a different wool.
Like if you used American Targhee. Targhee's a good one that just puffs. Just puffs up. Yeah. So and it would never drape or hang down.
Interesting. Yeah. So the breed-specific wool concept, it seems like it was very much the norm back then, because everybody would use their own flock. And then we kind of got away from it because everybody just started mass producing fibers, and now we're back into that, or it just never left?
There was a group of us who it never left. So I've worked with my hands forever. I learned to knit by a woman in the city of Buffalo. I wish I knew her name to go thank her. I was 9, and my girlfriend and I at the time, we would play with the boys because there was more boys in the neighborhood, and we'd play kickball and football and whatever. And she thought of us as hooligans. Irish Catholic community. Yes. So she decided to teach us hooligans something practical. And she made us sit down and knit. And then we moved and I never saw her again. So I've been reintroduced to it then when I visited my in-laws in my 20s and saw all those sheep. And then never stopped. The love just became more and more and more, and the passion evolved and grew and changed, and I've never stopped learning. It's just fantastic. So there's always been us rabid, like the people you're seeing here, but the slow fashion movement, I think, is having a big impact on what's happening now, because so much clothing, fast fashion ends up in the dump, and whereas the fast fashion movement is negatively impacting the earth, the environment, because of how much is thrown away. Those clothes that might be $3 to $5 are in the garbage by the end of the season, where wool is not. It's biodegradable. So if it is in the garbage, it's okay. Yeah. It'll go back to the earth.
And it keeps the hooligans out of trouble, right?
Keeps us hooligans out of trouble.
Well, my niece is, you talk to her, she's 14 years old now.
Yeah.
She wants to shop at the used clothing stores because they want something that has a little bit of a
history.
History, less of an impact on the earth, and that is not this brand screaming mass-produced thing.
Right.
So I look at this and I think, okay, I could see this whole generational change occurring in the knitting and the wool industry.
Yes. Well, Parsons School of Design, the Parsons School from New York City, is actually here. There's about 20 of them here at the festival to learn about rare breed wools and the differences in wools.
Well, thank you so much for talking about your sheep. This has been absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And I'll cut your sweater again.
Yes, you can. Yes.